Surviving in the Corporate World with AI Taking Over with today's special guest, Philip Blackett, on today's episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Now, I've been out of the corporate world or working for large businesses since 2010, so I haven't been an insider for a long time. And when biggest experience of my last large company, which was huge, was that they were still using like databases from the 1980s, and they did a lot of data entry to move data from one computer to the other. And it reminded me a lot of air traffic control, which the computers in air traffic control are like from the 1940s. And we don't know how to update them. And I was like, that's very worrying. They're still using like light tubes. So I wonder, a lot of our audience is people who are in corporate, and they have this one question, which is, how much AI do I need to learn to protect myself? What's the amount I need to know? And that's the starting part where I'd like to start. I know it's a tough question, but let's start from there.
It's funny you asked it, Jonathan, because I think even in your question that some of your audience are asking, it almost sounds, okay, Philip, be real with me. What's like the bare minimum that I should learn just to make sure I don't get in trouble, I don't undermeet expectations, I don't get on some sort of PIP or potentially lose my job? And so I think the way we approach it is very important to think of in terms of, okay, let's not figure out what it is that we need to learn just to get by. This is a technology that is evolving by the day, literally. This is something that it's outpacing human intelligence in terms of how evolved, how advanced, how useful and productive it is. So it's almost in a sense that even if you get to the bare minimum, Jonathan, by tomorrow, the next week, or the next year, it's going to be almost obsolete. So it's more so the sense, not so much what's the bare minimum, but let's adopt a growth mindset in terms of, hey, AI is here to stay. Let's learn what it's about. How does it apply to my job? Take inventory of what we actually do day-to-day, jobs to be done, and figure out what things you absolutely have to do. That's only something that a human can do, like you. And what are the things that you could outsource, whether it's to another person, or in this case, have AI do it to free your time up to do more of what's in your sphere of genius, while at the same time understanding this is something you're going to continue to grow into if you want to be increasingly more valuable to your company or the organization you work with.
I think that it's so scary for people, the idea that you can never know everything. Like, you can't actually know AI. It's like a snake eating its own tail. It's uncatchable. And that's really challenging. And I think that's where people get really scared. And I feel the same way I did as a kid, trying to do double Dutch jump roping, right? Which I've never successfully jumped into. It's like it's moving, wait for that right moment. Should I wait until we've chosen the next thing? I'm about to use one tool. Oh, wait, OpenAI has an update. Oh, Google has an update. Oh, wait, Google's update has a problem. And it's very hard because there's so much news, which is so hype heavy, to get a feel. And I think that's where it comes from. This is, there's so much, I can never know everything. So what can I act to know? So I don't know that it comes from the bare minimum. Part of it probably does, but it's like, I want to know where the line is to make sure I stay above it, right? I want to stay above, like, I have to be able to run a mile in 8 minutes. So I have to be below that. That's the kind of line they're looking for. And I think that it's a very stressful time because this is a major technological shift. And for people that are older, maybe went through the personal computer shift in the 80s and the internet shift in the late 90s. So they've been through this before, and technologies will come and go very quickly sometimes. Nobody has a pager anymore. No one uses a fax machine anymore. Things that were critical and like game changers are now gone. And that's where I think they're wondering about. And most of the people that I work with are really starting from the point of figuring out where to position themselves. Does my job actually require AI? Am I in a position where it matters? And that's, I think, where they're coming from. And I think it's not crazy just because there have been so many fads and so many trends that have turned out not to matter, that they're a little bit burned out on hype, which I get. And that's really the question. So when you coming from the corporate world and seeing these things, the other thing, my experience has always been that the larger the company, the slower they are to adapt to new technologies. If you look at what happened when streaming, like downloading music, happened in the late 90s, the record companies adapted very slowly.
Right.
And their first thought was, can we sue everyone to stop them from sharing music with each other? We've already seen that now. People are trying to sue OpenAI and sue AI for writing things or doing things or sounding like them. And that's all eventually going to shake out. But those take years. By the time the law finishes, the technology's gone past that point anyway.
Exactly.
So a lot of large companies are trying to put the genie back in the bottle or saying, nobody use AI. Or everyone use AI, right? And I don't know which way my company's going to go. How do I know? I guess maybe this is the place to start from. Like, how do I know what's going to be useful at my particular job? What's the foundational stuff? Where should I start as someone who not looking to be an entrepreneur, just wants to do their job better, do their job faster, and future-proof themselves?
So I think the first thing that comes off, Jonathan, is it's helpful for us to adopt more of a mindset of what our manager, our boss, our employer is likely taking in this time. We can't be necessarily limited to just our own silo, right? Our cubicle, our job responsibilities and roles when we first got hired for the job, which was probably years ago. Because to be fair, I would imagine those roles and responsibilities probably need to be updated from what it was back when we first got hired. So I think part of it, I would say, is you're right. Many of the bigger companies, they move at a slower pace. For a period of time before AI really came into the scene, many of those businesses could truly get away with it. And they could be content with just, hey, that's just our sales cycle. That's just how we move. It's almost a given as far as part of what our culture is. But because of AI, it basically is democratizing access to game-changing technology that helps people become much more productive, to the point where now a lot of these bigger businesses are seen as more threatened by smaller companies that are more nimble to change. Companies are much more willing to take a chance to experiment with certain tools and just let's see what happens. If this one works out, great. If it doesn't, let's try another tool. And so I think that for people that are employees or professionals, the thought is, at least for a second, think about it from the perspective of those who employ you, of your bosses and of your managers. They're trying to keep up. And they're probably seeing in their boardrooms, in their conference calls, their meetings, their closed door get-togethers, hey, our lunch is about to get taken. It's about to be eaten by a smaller company with startup funding. Either we got to figure out a way to adapt and have our team adapt with it, or we're running the risk of getting behind that could lead to major changes that could include layoffs. And so I think that one of the things that comes off top of mind for me is more, okay, take your job, but then also think about it in the sense of ask yourself just a simple question. How can I do my job better with the help of AI? And then from there, I would say we have to get into experimentation mode. We have to try some things out, ask some questions, talk to fellow team members. Hey, what are you using? What are you doing? Is ChatGPT the only tool that's out there that we can use, or is there something different? Just being open to that type of change can really be helpful, especially if you multiply that times the number of employees you have in your organization.
So let's say that there's really nothing coming down from on high. Like you're not hearing that feedback from your boss yet. That's worrying. And there's another thing, which is that most people don't have a definition of what AI is. So we've seen that a lot of boards of directors say to the CEO, we need to implement AI this year. And he goes, great. What do you mean? And they go, we don't know. We just know we want it. And that's the worst kind of instruction you can get, which is do what I want, but I won't tell you what it is. Like every
I have no idea what
freelancer
it is.
So it can be, that's where I worry about. And that's what I try to help people with the most is to get specific, which is what tools exist and what tools have usefulness, because there's so much hype. It's really hard to separate the signal from the noise. Even really large companies that are doing massive launches are just ChatGPT wrappers. And people are finding out, wait a minute, why would I use this when I can just use ChatGPT? So that's the second area of trepidation, which is, okay, I know I want to learn AI, but I can't even tell what's useful and not useful, where I should start. And we've even seen companies go public saying that they're an AI company, and then the stock tanks after 2 days. So people go, wait a minute, they have no AI tech at all. They just put in their stock ticker. So there's a whole, even at the highest level, we've seen this with multiple companies going public in last year that did that. It happened more than once, which is really astounding. So it's very reasonable to people go, I can't even tell. This is my full-time job. And it takes me about an hour of testing a product to know for sure what's happening if they're using AI, if they're faking, if they're using their own AI, or if they're using a ChatGPT or Anthropic's AI or Claude's API, like these other tools. So for the person who's a beginner, it can be very murky, and it's reasonable because there's news every day. Hey, that's my full-time job. And if I don't check the news every day for several hours, then I'm out of touch. And that's too much to ask for people. So what would you say is like the starting point? Okay, you decide, okay, I want to do this. What's the first way to dip your toe in the water?
I think one thing that can be used as the first thing to do is recognize, one, many of us want to be led. We want to be told exactly what to do, what buttons to push, where to go, have it all mapped out for us, right? We want that sort of structure. And what you're highlighting, Jonathan, is that because it seems like it's like the Wild West here, that everything goes, we're just trying to figure it out, that the leaders we're dependent on in the workplace are trying to figure it out just as much as we are. And so I think that the first thing I would think in terms of is understand there's a possibility that my manager or my boss or my team leader is probably in the same position as I am. We're just trying to figure it out. We have no idea. But once we get to that point, okay, then the question becomes what's next? Like you say, Jonathan, what do we do about it? Where two things come to mind for me is one, there's power in a team and people like coming together. So two minds are better than one as far as, hey, Jonathan, you're in the same boat as I am. This whole AI thing is new. Let's link up. Let's figure out, like, what are you doing? What are you seeing? Here's what I'm seeing. And how can we essentially collaborate to figure this out, whether or not our boss tells us or not? Maybe we can pose some potential solutions to our team and our managers as a result of us working together. And if it's not even that, if it's more of an individual standpoint, I will look at it more so the sense of saying, hey, there may be direction coming from up high. There may not. It may not even touch my area, at least not yet. Now the question becomes, are you content with how things have been done in your job up to this point? Or do we make a decision to take some proactive initiative to say, let's try to learn this and figure out what can I start applying with and figure out if I can find a solution myself.
So here's something interesting. I want your perspective on this. In America, we say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Australia and other countries, they say the tall flower gets cut down, which is if you draw attention to yourself.
That's true.
And it's interesting that we're like, oh, if you stand out, people will help you. Like, no, if you stand out, they'll take you down. Last time I worked at a big job, there was a lot of politicking and infighting. The larger the companies that exist, and it's if you start drawing attention to yourself, it's not always a good thing. People go, oh, look at Jonathan. He's trying to be the AI guy. So that's another worry that I think about, which is if no one else is saying anything, and then you can start to have a problem. Like you become the person who's talking about AI all the time, and then it doesn't work out, right? You're just like the NFT person at the office. Now no one talks to him. So I think about that as well, which is the social element of how do I not look the kid, maybe this way, the kid who always would say, hey teacher, you forgot to give us our homework.
You don't want to be a nerd here. You don't want to be the killjoy in the classroom.
I remember, and the kid would always say, the teacher would just give us the homework, double homework tomorrow to make up for missing it today. And I don't know if that's true, right? But that was they were like, no, I'm not making things worse. I'm making things better. So I wonder about that. And it's standing out can cause, if you learn AI, then the boss might go, hey, you know what? Everyone else needs to learn AI just like Jonathan did. And then suddenly everyone at work hates you. So there's this other dynamic that it's very complicated to navigate.
I resonate with what you're saying, Jonathan, because I've been in school before where we had the substitute teacher and he or she was going to bring in the TV back then to watch a movie. And we knew we were going to have an easy day off. And then you had that one student that say, hey, Mr. Johnson, Actually, on the syllabus, we were supposed to cover photosynthesis. Actually, here's a textbook reading on how we're supposed to go about it. And the whole class wants to throw, let's just say, lunch
Yeah.
food at him when it comes time to after class. But I think even in that made up example, John, that I think a key principle comes up that I would highlight here. What is more important to you in this situation? I think it's more so the question we have to ask ourselves. Is it more important for us to be able to move forward as a team and for me to learn how to be the best at my job that could essentially help other people in our team move forward? Or is it better yet for me to lay low, not say anything, and wait to be told what to do anyways, just so I don't have anybody look at me a certain type of way socially, and maybe they don't want to talk to me at the water cooler or sit with me at the lunch table later on that day? Because like you said before, you keep up with the news. I do as well, particularly on LinkedIn. And ever since January, all I'm seeing on a weekly basis are major companies and businesses laying off people, hundreds and thousands of people. Some of those people didn't have the option to learn about AI or how it could benefit their job or how they can better improve their prospects of keeping their job and their career, which if they had the option, I'm pretty sure they probably would care less about what other people thought and more about, listen, you're not paying my mortgage. You're not paying my car payment and my rent. So whatever it takes for me to keep my job and take care of my family, I'm going to do it. So I think, not at the risk of trying to be a little overly simplistic here, I think we have to, in this scenario, ask ourselves, what's more important? Keeping our job and moving our company forward, or trying to be the cool kid in the office room at the risk of us losing our job later?
So, yeah, I think about when, if you do it right, you can make yourself indispensable. So the person who knew how to fix the copier was almost bulletproof 30 years ago. Then it was the person who knew how the fax machine worked. Then it was the person who knew how to update the website. I remember so many companies I work with, they were like, oh, only Dan knows how to update the website. We don't even know how to log in. And I was like, wow, Dan has made a good move. Dan's got the keys to the city. And now it's the social media accounts. And I feel like that could be the right way to do it. And this is what I'd love to figure out with you is like to become the person who is the office expert on AI. So you become the person when it comes to when they're asking questions, because you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than your friend.
Then the person behind.
Yeah. If you're the first person who gets AI, even if someone then learns the more than you, you're still who they get used to asking questions to. So I see it as, and I'm just trying to navigate this, right? As establishing your position as the person who just gets it and who answers questions all day long. And when they go, hey, Jonathan, how do I log into AI again? All of that stuff. You almost can end up becoming the office tech support, which you don't want, but there's like a narrow walk there. And then the other element is that it can lead to quick promotions because they need someone in charge of these projects, in charge of these decisions, telling them which tools work and which tools don't. So there's a lot of opportunities there. So how do you feel someone can establish themselves as the office expert without coming across as the homework asker or the know-it-all?
Right. So I think one key thing that comes up in my mind too is it's almost like once upon a time, as you said before, Jonathan, if I was the only person who knew how to keep the copier functioning, yes, you're always going to have a job. If I knew how to update the website, if I knew how to update and promote on social media, I always have a job there. The challenge, though, is I think that for many businesses, especially the higher up you go as far as size, is many of these businesses are trying to systematize what you know. It's in their best interest to put it in a process and a guidebook, something that basically says, hey, Philip, that's great, this information. Can you work with Jonathan and share with him what you know so we can document this so that, God forbid, if you were sick and we needed an issue, right? The nice way is if you're sick or if you're on vacation, Philip, I don't want to bother you while you're on vacation. So I'll talk to Jonathan and we'll pull up this guy and we'll know exactly what you know to keep the ship going. So what comes with that is understanding, okay, that's probably an expectation that we should go into the situation with, right? And this is what gets this whole sense of the knowledge, but you can't just rest on your laurels and just say, hey, I'm good. AI is something that, because it's constantly modifying, evolving, and changing, the person that's going to actually take up on this role has to keep learning, has to keep growing with it. Because at the same time, the moment I learn something about ChatGPT taking on a function, my boss or my team may say, hey, Philip, can you teach us this? Okay, so once I teach them that, now we're on the same level again. So now I got to keep learning what's the next thing? What's the thing they're not understanding already? So it's almost like you said before, as a paraphrase I used to learn, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed person is king. So the question is, how do I stay the one-eyed person one step ahead as the people I'm leading are constantly, I'm teaching them, I'm getting them up to speed. But now, if I'm going to take on this role, have to make the commitment to keep learning. What's the next thing? What's the next iteration? What's the next tool? So that as I'm teaching people, they say, hey, I got to keep Philip, if nothing else, because he's teaching our team. He's leading our team here. Because as soon as I systematize it, I'm going to be like, okay, thanks, Philip. I have all I need to know. Nope, I got some more things I learned next week. I'll teach you that too.
I think that's one advantage. It's a way to take that, how much stuff is changing, and use it to your advantage, right? Instead of saying, oh, there's so much to learn, that means I always can be one step ahead of everyone else. And that's really all that you and I do, is stay a little bit ahead of everyone else. Like, we don't. Sometimes people are surprised that I haven't used every AI tool. And I'm like, there's 100,000 of them. I see a lot of people who say things like, these are my 50 favorite AI tools. And I go, how is that possible? How could you possibly have used 50 tools enough to have favorites? That's astounding to me. I used maybe 12 or 13 tools because of the job. If it wasn't, I would be using 2 to 3, maybe 4. But my job, so I have a few extra tools and backups. But that's really, when someone says 50, I go, that's insane. That's impossible. It's just a number you can't keep up with. There's no way that mathematically you're doing that. If you're using them all 50 tools every week, that's like 4 minutes per tool per week.
Well, and I would love to know how that person does it, because initially, like you're saying, John, I'm thinking, oh, 50 tools. Now I'm just going to put on a list to say, look what I know, as opposed to what's more impressive. Okay, walk me through each one of these 50 tools that are your favorites compared to the other ones you tested. And then in particular, how have you used those 50 tools, and demonstrate that to me? That'd be even more impressive.
So what I always recommend to people is that you just need a couple of things. You need a text generator like ChatGPT, Claude, Google's, I guess, if you're willing to live on the edge. You need an image generator, and I'm a Midjourney guy. That's the foundational place. And then you don't need a lot of different things, because ChatGPT is a real generalist. It can do almost everything. So can Claude do almost everything. They're very similar to each other. And you don't need to do both. I'm not very good at Claude. I've used it like 7 times. I know I have them. I don't think I have the paid account. I can't remember. Maybe I do. But I just don't. I'm so busy trying to master one tool to try and learn them all. It's not really necessary. So I think that helps people to pull back. And I'm also getting more and more interested in data organization tools, like things that there are a lot of AI softwares coming out that are good at helping you find files. Like when a missing project, they're better at searching for, we'll search your Dropbox file, your S3, and your hard drive to look for the file. I think that's really useful. And the other area I really like is like email organization, or AI to keep your communication. Like you and I have emailed, we've messaged on one platform, and we've messaged on LinkedIn. If all of that could be found by one database, that would be so useful, because that's really where a lot of balls get dropped, I think, when we're jumping communication channels and something gets missed. So I think that, but again, that's 4 different ideas. I don't think you need to go down a lot of rabbit holes. Like people love to look at creating AI video and creating AI music. And I always say, how many songs did you make last year at your job? None. Then why do you need to make songs this year just because AI can do it? So
Yeah,
I love the things you're talking about, but where do you think, someone starting out, do you think I'm on the right wavelength, or coming from the insider perspective, do you think there's other tools they really need to think about?
yeah. I think the rule of thumb here, Jonathan, is look for tools that are relevant to what you do on a day-to-day 9-to-5 basis, right? So if your job is producing letters, if you're like in public relations and that sort. And part of your job is to produce written communications. Then yeah, a text generator, generative AI and that sort, absolutely helpful. You can use image generator too if you're doing press releases or posts on social media and you try to come up with a nice thumbnail and that sort. Makes sense. I wouldn't think it would make sense for you to use an app like Opus Clip or Captions if you're in communications, unless you're involved with video production, right? So unless your job requires you to produce videos for your organization, you probably should leave those tools alone. And maybe it might be a personal hobby you do, but I think an easy way to not get overwhelmed with the sheer, for lack of a better word, plethora of AI tools out there is really take stock in what do you do in your job. List out all the jobs to be done in your job. And then out of that, figure out, okay, are there any tools that can help me do the jobs I am being paid to do, help me do it more efficiently, save on time, make it more accurate, more productive, and then just focus on that. Because I think what happens here is you get caught up like a kid in the candy store and you get distracted because you see all these different buckets of candy. And it's okay, which is the one that you're actually going to eat? Which is the one that actually is the one that you want to do, and focus on that.
This is something I strongly agree with, is that it's better to use AI to do what you already know how to do faster than to try to add new jobs to yourself. Because if I start going into like high level video production, if I've never done it before, I can't tell if it's doing it right or wrong or making mistakes or error correcting. So anytime you go outside what you're already doing, you have a lot more risk and you're just giving yourself more work, which is not what you want to do. You want to use AI to give yourself less work. So I love what you're talking about. I agree with that a great deal. And I think this has been a really useful conversation. I love hearing from your perspective as someone who's come from more recently the corporate world. Where can people find out about the books you've written, more about what you're doing, and connect with you online, and of course, follow you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think it'd be great, Jonathan, for people that want to continue the conversation. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look me up by my name, Philip Blackett. There we can connect via message. I also have a Use AI to Grow Your Business weekly newsletter that I produce on LinkedIn as well, where I talk about certain topics related to AI. But you can also check me out on Amazon, where I have a couple books on AI, particularly Future Proof, how to adopt and master artificial intelligence to secure your job and career. Just look up my name, Philip Blackett, on Amazon. And then lastly, if there's any other social networks you want to connect with me on, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and that sort. Just look up my name, Philip Blackett.
And I'll link to everything below the video for those of you watching on YouTube. And for those of you who are watching the live stream, I'll link below that. And of course, in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Philip. This was another amazing episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Happy to be here with you.